Over my lifetime, I've had various Christian folks come up to me and ask me about my salvation. I've heard questions like, are you saved? Are you born again? Have you given your life to Jesus Christ? Are you a believer? Are you receiving the sacraments regularly in your life? Are you living in a state of grace? But I've never heard anyone come up to me and say, John, are you living Matthew 25? Never. Never. Yet this gospel is a judgment scene about our salvation. All the nations will be assembled before the King of creation, and in these words the judgment is made. Whatever you did or did not do, for the least ones you did or did not do, for me. These are chilling words. And what also is so extraordinary is that Jesus, in this gospel, so identifies with the least ones that it's him that is there. And both groups don't see him. Don't see him. This Christ, the King, who comes and identifies so with the least of humanity, is where this King resides. It is from this gospel and others like it that we get the great river of Catholic social teaching. It began in the early church with how Christians and saints lived their life in this world, and it was articulated profoundly by Pope Leo XIII in 1891. And since then, Pope after Pope and Bishop after Bishop have written about how we as Catholics are meant to live in the world. And they say this, that the church, us, transcends the world, and it also exists in the world. It has a duty to seek to transform the world according to the mind and message of Christ. What they're saying is that we are meant to have one foot in heaven and one foot on earth. And that our foot on earth affects our life in heaven. This mind of Christ in the Catholic tradition is this, that all human life is sacred. Sacred. All of it. All human life is sacred. And that the human person has been given a transcendent, divine dignity. All people have a transcendent dignity. All of us. That makes me proud to be Catholic. That is the foundation of our understanding of living in this world. And our job is to bring that mercy and justice of God into all stratas of society, every nook and cranny, every place we go, we're meant to bring it and thereby
transform the world. Now, how and what does Christianity bring to this world that is different, perhaps, than other programs to improve society? Well, the church says this, and this is out of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. Listen carefully. No legislation could, by itself, do away with the fears, the prejudices, the attitudes of pride, the selfishness, which obstruct the establishment of fraternal societies. Such behavior will only cease only through the charity that finds in every man and woman a neighbor, a brother, a sister. What the church is saying here is that we are called to bring God's love, God's charity into the world. And when we do, that love is transformative. That we are bearers of something greater than ourselves. And when we bring it, it affects the human life. That's what we do as church. We live in a planetary society, a society where our neighbor is everywhere, within our influence. That's an extraordinary opportunity. It means we, in our efforts to bring charity and love and justice to the world, can influence the globe. You and I with our gifts, all different. These extraordinary talents can be brought to bear on the world itself when it's imbued with the charity and mercy and justice of God. This is no small thing. You know, in this world, 795 million people are hungry. And every 10 seconds, a child dies from hunger and related disease. How many children died since Mass began? In America, we have 2,220,300 people in prison. We are 4.4% of the world's population, and we have 22% of the world's prisoners. And how many people in this world, or even around here, are just unwelcome? What is our response? If you're like me, a lot of times in my past, I said, I'm just too busy. I take care of my family. Or that stuff is just too complex. It's beyond me. And you feel paralyzed in front of it. Or you think, those governments of those poor countries, they're just so corrupt. If I help starving people, I'll just prop up those corrupt governments. Well, the Bible does not give us that option. It just doesn't. It calls us to respond to the needs of the least among us in whatever way we can, to respond, to feed the hungry, to welcome the unwelcomed, to visit the prison, and to clothe the naked, and to change the social and political structures that create poverty and injustice wherever we find it. To change it. What creates this? Now, we just can't be paralyzed. I went to visit someone in prison last week, and I'm embarrassed to say it's my first time visiting someone in prison. The thought of going to a prison just always weirded me out. I just didn't want to go. But I knew this person, I knew his wife, and I went. You know what? It was no big deal. It really wasn't. In fact, my visit with this man was just amazing. Amazing encounter of grace. You see, friends, we're meant to act and to move out, not in paralysis, but in action. So think and pray and consider, where is the tug in your life? What one thing can you do? Just one thing. And do it. Even if you don't know how it's going to play out or how it'll work out, just act. When you act in God's mercy, mercy is effective. It affects those to whom you bring it. People see what you do, and it has an effect, like the ripples in a pond in others' lives. Because when we bear Christ, we bear not just ourselves, and he changes human life. What you do or do not do to the least ones, you do or do not do for me.